Hello and welcome to PhDear Diary. My name is Andy Salkeld and this is my video blog, video diary during the time of doing a PhD at Leeds Beckett University. I'm researching organisational finance and its impact on individual psychological outcomes. So we are now 5 months in. I think this is episode 21. I might be off by a bit. I can never really remember. And things have been progressing well this week. As I was saying last week, I'd done a lot of work on my online survey using the Qualtrics platform. So that's now all set up, and I handed it over to my supervisor to review. And he reviewed it, broadly happy with it, almost there. A couple of points came back that I'll go through today to explain kind of some of the complexities that are going on with it. I also attended a conference and presented there, and have started making some progress on some other things. So the points that came back were relatively minor. So the first one was using an automatically generated ID rather than having a user define it. So in my previous research, what I'd asked people to do is basically generate their own unique ID. And this is between like 5 characters, mixture of letters and words that is something that they'll remember. And what my supervisor suggested was just use a random number, randomly generated when people sign up. The system can do that and then do that. And that's absolutely fine. It makes it a lot easier. It stops people typing things in. It stops people having to think about like that sort of stuff, which is really good. Like it separates everything out and so on. So it means there's less overhead on the individual when they're going through the process. Now, what immediately came through to my mind when I was going through this was actually some of these, this is not a unique random number that's created. This is just a random number that's created. And therefore, in the weird absolute world that can occur when things are generated randomly, 2 people could be generated the same random number. So my thought and my process immediately went to, well, what are the odds in what sample size that could ultimately create this? And then I was curious as to whether it was a hypergeometric distribution or anything like that. And it's kind of like, what sample size does it become an actual problem? Because each time you pull another number, then so first one's generated. So the first one out of, say, 10,000 is created randomly. The next one comes out. You then have to check it against one number. And that should hopefully kind of match up. It says encoding overloaded. That's an interesting thing that's never occurred so far. Then the second one has to check against 2 previous ones. And in what sample size of population does this start becoming an issue? And does it start happening? So the suggestion was to go for having a selection between, say, 10,000 and 100,000, or just under, so that it's always 5 digits long. I decided to go between 100,000 and 1 billion, but 999,999, purely because I just didn't want. I wanted to minimize, because I'm going to be looking at samples upwards of 600. I wanted it to be minimal that this is likely to become an issue. Clearly, random chance can still make it happen. It is random chance. That's the whole purpose of a randomly generated ID. One thing that would be useful for Qualtrics to add would be just a unique random ID. So it checks previous entrants or participants and says, I generated this random number last time. I will now generate a random number that excludes this one this time, and that way there would be none of this concern in it. So that's just it's a maths point, but I love maths point. I find them very interesting. So I wanted to go for more security and less chance of failure. But what that also allowed me to do is now I've included it in the footer of every page. Whenever I say to someone, if you want to withdraw, send me your participant ID number, and I can. And then I can reference it throughout the template now, which is fantastic, because it just means that rather than me referring to what they type in, it's already generated, which is great. It just gives me it makes it feel nicer, even though nothing has changed dramatically. The next question, or the next point, which is it's a very nuanced point, and it's one of those things that I find incredibly hard to discuss well and to understand well. It was about a demographic question about race and ethnicity, and I had used kind of pretty standard kind of American questions, and the suggestion was to just use what was used on the UK 2011 census survey. So I just swapped to that. Sorry, one thing I'll just point out now, just because I've noticed it, is you'll notice that there's probably some noise in the background. I have a fan going and I have windows open. It is absolutely boiling here in the UK, and I'm doing what I can to keep the place cool for both me and Pika. At some point I may have to consider getting an air conditioning unit just to actually cool rooms down. One of the big problems with the UK is that our buildings are designed to keep us warm, not keep us cool, and you can end up being extremely hot inside and much cooler outside, whereas actually you kind of want it the other way around. You'd rather, or at least I would, I'd rather be cool inside and go outside to warm up if I want to. Anyway, so the race ethnicity question. So demographic questions are important because they help us describe our sample or our sample population. So if all the participants of my survey are, say, of white or white-related ethnicity, then I can't generalize to all ethnicities and all populations. So recording it at least gives people an idea of what the population is like that has taken part in the study. And the way these are described is incredibly nuanced, and it's just one of those things that I've always found hard to articulate, because I don't know if race or ethnicity is going to have a significant impact on my questions about organisational financing or individual psychological outcomes. But there could be factors like that are a part of it, and therefore I need to track it, because if I find there is a significant difference between, say, white and other ethnicities, then I need to make note of that so that other people that read my research can suddenly be like, okay, well, maybe this doesn't apply to our population or our organisation, and so on. So, did that. The next section, or the next questions, were about my about the second batch of questions. So when I asked people to categorize the finance team they work with, and then later on in the study, I assigned them randomly to a different one. And what this means is and then I asked them the same question, say, how would you feel relative to XYZ? And this way, I'll be able to see the differences if they're going from, say, a 1 to a 4, or a 1 to a 3, or a 2 to a 4, etc. And when I ask them the second questions, I need to make the questions conditional. Now, I'd gone through this and tried to make reference to it. So say, in your new organisation, working with your new finance team. In your new organisation, working with your new finance team. But what I didn't add is would you feel, do you feel this is likely to occur? Because obviously they can't say in absolute certainty whether this is or isn't happening. It's what they imagine or perceive based on the information I have presented through the reference shift. I have shifted their frame of reference. So I've gone through and I've changed those. And then the final one, and this is just complexity in the presentation, is I have 4 vignettes. So these are 4 2-paragraph blocks about 4 different finance teams. And it's how best to present these on screen and on mobile, because some people do it on both. So I'd originally put them in colour, but what we then thought is actually colour could lead to some people having, say, cognitive bias. If they like blue over red, they're halfway through a survey and they're like, ooh, I like blue, I like that blue, I'll click that, without reading the content and so on. And then we discussed whether we should go for so I've removed the colour, and then it's whether I highlight or unhighlight the key words of each paragraph. So this is things like where I say the finance team is focused on X, Y, Z. Should I highlight X, Y, Z to make it more apparent that this is what I want them to focus on? So what I've done is I've prepared 2 new versions that are higher resolution, because they weren't showing up well on mobile. So higher resolution, higher image quality. The text is larger, so it becomes easier to see. And then it is, and then I've done one with and one without highlighting or emboldening words, and that way it's suddenly. And we're just going to have that discussion with my supervisor, and we're going to say, right, this is what we're going to go, and we're just going to go with it, and we're going to have to figure it out, see what's right. And I'm going to run it past a couple of the accountants that I know, just because I want to see if they think those are the appropriate words to highlight and so on. So that's all sorted. So I've now refreshed my study, and my Qualtrics page is now all working, which I'm happy with. So I'll go through that with my supervisor this week, or I need to get these terms right because they're going to change shortly, which is something else that happens this week. So Dr. Chanky Moon is my director of studies. So person in charge of making sure I do all the things that I say I'm going to do and telling me where to focus my attention. But as part of a PhD, you need a supervisory team, so you typically have a second supervisor. And I've been in discussions with another member of staff called Dr. Jim Morgan, who is kind of a specialist in organisational psychology, particularly safety climate, I believe. I'm doing this from memory. Apologies, Jim, if you're listening. And out of all the people in the department, Jim was the one that I was most interested in working with, because he's worked with large organisations. It seems to be very kind of, I will call it kind of industry focused rather than academic focused. So it seems to be more about what exists in workplaces, not necessarily academic applied to workplaces, which is very much the way I'm approaching all my work, which is like, I have experienced this in practice or in industry. This is what I have seen, and now I want to take what I'm doing in academia and apply it to those contexts, rather than focusing on the academia and then saying, well, here's what I think it will happen. It's shifting the focus. I care about what does happen in industry that I have seen and experienced, and the way Jim describes himself fits with kind of what I am interested in, and so on. So I've now set up a meeting with him next week to kind of discuss if he's interested, if it's something he'd like to partake in. The good thing from his part is, because I have such a good working relationship with Chanky already, I'm not expecting it to take a significant amount of his time to be involved with it, but he may be fascinated by the idea and concept and just want to get involved. But in general planning purposes, it gives both Chanky and I a second person to speak to and be like, what are your thoughts on this? Because and this is the problem in many businesses, when you work so closely with someone, you end up in a really good working relationship, which is fantastic. But you don't necessarily consider anything from outside, and you don't have that kind of secondary or tertiary review point to make sure that you're both doing the right thing. So it's important to find a second supervisor. It just hasn't been a priority until now. But this is where we're progressing. I also presented at the SciSen conference this week, which is the SciSen PhD conference, where basically all the PhD candidates kind of present what they've been doing, what they've figured out, what they found out. Now, obviously, I don't have very much information right now. I have no data, so as I discussed last week, I kind of prepared a bit of a sorry, that was just Jim replying and just changing the time. So I just I presented here's an overview of what I'm doing. And it was adopted quite well. They liked it. It was mostly funny. It was all memes. But I needed to how do you make someone interested and immediately engage with your topic? And that was the way I felt I could really do that, and get people talking about it. And there was no questions. One of the people said, it looks fascinating, but it looks massive. And I was like, it does. And it is. And it gets it is a huge topic, and no one's looked at it. No one has considered this, to my knowledge. So that's, again, why having someone like Jim, who has seen and done more and different things in the field, that would be a really nice addition, because maybe I've missed something, and so on. But yeah, so presented that, caught up with the other candidates that I've met. Really good session. Really enjoyed seeing some of their work. The one thing that kind of caught me was there is a lot more qualitative work being done and less quantitative work being done. When I was talking about structural equation modeling and things like that, it was and then everyone else was presenting about, I did qualitative interviews, I did what's it called, focus groups, things like that. It was very clear that there is more of a qual focus, which is fine. They are both absolutely credible resource methods, etc. I want to do qual myself, but I certainly felt that my focus on quant, because of my maths background and enjoyment of maths, I was in the minority, which is interesting because I have always considered that to be the majority. So it's fascinating to see how it differs from where things are. And that's kind of where the PhD is at. I'm going to have a meeting with Jim next week, which will allow me to have kind of a bit of just a chat, figure out what's going on, have a discussion about everything. Then hopefully get everything signed off with Chanky. If Jim's interested, I'll run everything by Jim and just be like, hey, this is what I've got so far. This is where I'm going. How do you feel about this? And just get some extra insight into it and so on. And then move on to ethical approval and then funding approval to pay to have the study done. which is all great. This is where I'm at with everything. Outside of this, life has been relatively quiet, relatively kind of not much has been happening. I'm just trying to think. I started going to a personal trainer. I feel better for it, but I ache. I went yesterday, and it was hard, but it was good. And it's something that I really want to keep doing because it's something that matters to me. As I have gotten older in life, I have felt my body ache more and found it harder to change my body. So it's something I really want to prioritize over the next kind of year, 2 years, just get fitter. Like, I have accepted that I have a very different frame to my brothers. They are taller, they are kind of leaner than I am. But if I can get my frame as good as it can be, then I am happy with that. And that's kind of what I'm going to work towards slowly but surely over the next few months and years. Not much has been happening in terms of hobby space. Ever since Goonhammer, I've kind of taken a step back from Warhammer just because there was a lot of changes due. They have dropped. And it's very interesting, the kind of psychology of this. I play Adeptus Sororitas, which is Sisters of Battle, as shorthand, and they've been in a good spot. They've never been the best, but they have been kind of, if you play them well, they will perform well, sort of thing. So they warrant investment, and various buffs have come through that have made them better and better. And what's actually happened is, rather than the usual competitive player in me going like, I can't wait, I'm going to win more, I'm going to do this, I'm going to benefit from this, I actually am wanting to play them less because other people don't want to play them, and it's led to a very kind of negative feedback cycle around it, where it's like, I want to play Sisters, and then I win, and other people feel bad, and therefore I feel bad, and I don't want to play them, and then I get to play them again, and this has kind of gone round in circles. So I'm trying to moderate how I feel about it and not playing them as often. I'm seeing friends today. I'm not playing. No one was available last weekend, I don't think. There's something happening last weekend. Can't remember, you know. No, my mind is completely blank. I know I was away for a weekend when I went to see Toby. Maybe that was last weekend. I can't remember. But yeah, basically all of those changes have come through now. So I'm going to slowly start getting back into the hobby, ready for the tournaments I'm going to in July and August. Over the next couple of months, and just practice those. So anyway, that's kind of where we are right now. Life is moving forwards. I'm progressing in my work. I'm getting ready to do my first studies. Once the studies are out there, I'm just going to that's when I'm going to start writing. I'm going to start writing up everything I've done, write this chapter, because this is going to be one of my study chapters. So it's going to be 5,000 to 10,000 words on just this study, setting up everything about it, and then kind of going, so looking back, looking at all the kind of science I've brought into it, and just articulating everything that has happened during this process. That's a study chapter. Then I can go back and pick, say, various parts of the introduction, and so I can pick why I'm looking at individual psychological outcomes. So I can spend chapter on burnout, what's been happening with burnout, parts of stress. Say the focus is on work and only work related, and that's why I've chosen these separations and so on. and just basically start building out the thesis document, because it's going to be you're roughly aiming for around, let's say, 65 to 80,000 words. So looking at 8 chapters of 10,000 each, give or take, some around. That's kind of what you're looking towards. And every time I've written these things before, I've had to cut. So to get down to 5,000 words for my study for my master's dissertation, I had to cut from about 10,000 down to 5,000. So being able to actually elaborate at this level is fantastic. So I'm really excited about that. But what I want to do is I want to get data gathering done, or the first bit of data gathering out there, so that then I can just start writing in peace, and I can just be like, right, I'm just going to write up everything that I have, everything that I know, and start referencing out all these pieces so that I can then kind of come back later. So that's going to kind of be the back half of the year. And yeah, that's where we are with all that. Everything else is fine. I'm seeing one of my oldest friends is coming up from London and staying with me over the weekend. Don't quite know our plans yet, but should be good regardless. And then, yeah, cracking on with more of this next week. So thank you very much for tuning in, everyone. And I will see you in a week's time. Thank you.